Hi, scholars. This is Keith Hammond. Now, I've been grading your second essays this week, and far too many of you are using non scholarly sources. So, we really need to fix this issue. Let's begin by considering an essay one of you have written about Billy Collins' poem, Introduction to Poetry. And let me note up front that this particular essay is very well written with an excellent introduction to a pointed thesis, does a lot of things just right, but it doesn't support its argument with scholarly sources. And way too many of you are in the same unfortunate situation. We really do have to fix that. And note that the first reference cites the primary source of the poem, our textbook. This is a fine source for an academic essay. And by the way, too many of you didn't list your textbook as a source. You really must fix this. The problem I'm having, though, is with the second and third references, which are drawn from the websites Allocation and Poem Analysis. These are not acceptable scholarly sources. First, note that both of these are commercial sites, as indicated by their .com web addresses. Now, this .com web address is almost always a red flag to you that you are not visiting a credible scholarly site. There are a few exceptions, but not many. And if we link to Allocation, then we see that we are immediately bombarded with ads that have nothing to do with Billy Collins or his poem. That's why these sites exist, people, to sell you things. This is not scholarship. I've given you this paper to write because I want you to learn something about literature. And I want you to learn from real literary scholars. Now, one of the problems is that many of you chose to analyze a modern poem, such as Collins' Introduction to Poetry. And the fact is that you will not find extensive scholarship on current poets. Certainly not the kind of scholarship that's available on William Shakespeare or Andrew Marvell, for instance. Scholars have had centuries to write about every single poem or play by Shakespeare, but only a few decades to write about Billy Collins. So a Google search for Introduction to Poetry is just not going to give you much. So do you give up? No. You use better search tools. Now in this presentation, I'm going to focus on Google Scholar. Google Scholar is a specialized Google search engine that returns only scholarly sources. If you do a search for Billy Collins literary criticism, you get 24,000 links. Of course, not all the returns are useful, but that's okay. The purpose of this assigned essay is for you to learn something that isn't totally obvious to the rest of us. You have to demonstrate that you've learned something worth sharing with an academic audience. Because you're not likely to find many scholarly articles about a single modern poem, such as Introduction to Poetry, you'll have to scan through perhaps 15 or 20 of the listed articles here to find two or three that suit your purposes for writing about how Billy Collins uses figurative language to help readers enjoy poetry rather than to dissect poetry. Anyway, there are more than enough good articles listed on just the first 10 pages of a Google Scholar search to supply all the resources that you need. But if you need more, you can scroll down to the bottom of your Scholar search page to find a list of related search terms. You can click on some of these terms to get even more results if your first 24,000 are not quite enough. If you have questions about finding sources, contact me. Or even better, go to the library. They're better at it than I am. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the net.